I used to be a normal buy-to-let investor, but not anymore. I found a way to supercharge my results, like buy-to-lets on steroids. In this video, I want to talk about who normal buy-to-let investors or even armchair investors are, how I used to be one, and more importantly, how I made the conscious effort to try not to be one going forward. Who is a normal buy-to-let or armchair investor? A normal buy-to-let investor is usually someone who wants to invest in property for the long term for capital appreciation. When looking at buy-to-lets, they are usually looking at the gross yield to see whether or not it makes a good investment. They usually don't want to undertake and oversee a refurbishment, but are happy to do cosmetic works if necessary. They usually don't look at getting all or the majority of their money back out. There are different types of investors, and these include some of the following. Foreign overseas investors that invest in London or other major cities are looking for a safe haven to park their money and are looking for long-term capital appreciation and gross yields. The UK is seen as a safe haven when it comes to property investing due to its strong economic climate, its favourable property taxes, increasing property values, and established and growing buy-to-let sector. Overseas investors, particularly from Asia, Europe, and the US, invest significant amounts of money. The types of properties they tend to buy are often off-plan properties. Off-plan properties are properties that haven't been built yet but are being marketed to investors. I have been to presentations by Galliard Homes where they pitch off-plan properties which haven't been built yet, which are below market value. The pitch is that because the apartments haven't been built yet, they are often at significant discounts. Buyers are given the opportunity to exchange contracts on the day, only paying a £2,000 reservation deposit with the balance up to 10% due within 21 working days. Buying off plan lets you purchase property at a price that could be below its future market value. It's normally pitched that by the time it is built, it could be worth more than what you paid for it. Buying off plan is ideal if you want to resell the property once it's finished. Whether you plan to resell or live in the apartment, one of the biggest advantages of buying off plan apparently is selection. Unlike in completed buildings, you can usually select the ideal unit that suits your needs, tastes, and budget. This is true and makes sense, but this is where they are turning the investor into an emotional investor. So now every investor wants a view of the river because it will be nicer. In a rising market, some developers will permit the contracts to be sold on, which means that investors can take a profit on the unit before it is built by selling the contract to another investor. The following disadvantages or disclaimers are usually applied when it comes to off-plan property sold by these big developers. Buying off-plan property is far from risky, but the majority of developers are now offering a deposit guarantee for extra security. However, it's obviously not as certain as buying a new and completed or pre-owned property which you can touch and feel. There's also the possibility that your property purchase doesn't increase in value. To ensure optimum return on investment, it's best to look for off-plan properties that have been built by reputable developers. Developments near transport facilities tend to go well, and areas undergoing regeneration are sure to see an increase in capital value. The following incentives are usually on offer. Furniture packs. Apartments come fully furnished free of charge. Check this out from Galliard Homes. Free gym membership for a year. Service charge holidays. The way in which the apartments and development is dressed and marketed, it's hard not to want to buy one. I don't have any issues with these types of investments, but my only concern that there is no way to force the appreciation. You are reliant on buying at a perceived discount and then reliant on the capital appreciation to come in time. My question is, how much time? It feels difficult to fault these when you read the information provided by the developers. It seems like they've done so much due diligence on the area in terms of the location. How could they possibly be wrong? No doubt these apartments held for long enough will appreciate, but I'm usually looking to force the appreciation after 6 months of ownership, let alone waiting an uncertain amount of years. I'm sure someone who is able to bulk buy these properties is in a better position to negotiate a better discount, and then in this instance make a margin on any resale or remortgage. Business owners who are cash rich, looking to invest in property for the long term, who don't necessarily want to do any major refurbishment works. They have some spare cash which they would like to invest in something other than their primary business. It helps to diversify their portfolio. Generally, all they are looking for is a good property with a good yield and good long-term growth prospects. High net worth individuals, usually looking for trophy property, so it's all about location, location, location. Properties that they are likely to holiday or to use for business purposes. They are less likely to rent these properties out as they want to use them for themselves. Also, they are less likely to be concerned about the monthly mortgage payments. One Hyde Park is a good example, rubbing shoulders with the who's who of the world. Entrepreneurs. These types of people see other entrepreneurs investing and holding property and so decide to do the same. They are, however, more likely to want a deal given their nature and more likely to be interested in finding ways to add value to the property so that it's worth a lot more than they paid for it. Buying townhouses in exclusive parts of London, adding basements, or buying a number of houses to create a bigger house or mansion, for example. Someone with some savings. Someone who has had a windfall or inheritance, likely to want to invest in a traditional buy-to-let property, usually locally to where they live, the traditional way by putting down a deposit and then just renting out the property. How I was a normal buy-to-let investor or armchair investor. I used to buy properties the normal way. By that I mean I was only looking for three things when looking at a buy-to-let property: capital appreciation, cash flow, a good yield. I was working full-time, so I didn't want to undertake too much refurbishment works as I was worried about the time it would take, how much it would cost, and also worried about finding good tradespeople to complete the works. I realized that with this approach, I was leaving lots of money on the table. For example, my first investment property. I purchased this 3-bedroom house for £84,000 in Birmingham. This was my first buy-to-let property. I wanted to limit my risk and exposure, so decided to invest in Birmingham. I studied economics at the University of Birmingham, so spent 3 years there, so I knew the area to a certain extent. I knew there was strong rental demand with reasonably priced properties when compared to central London, where I was living at the time. I found this property on Rightmove, and what attracted me to it was that it was with Express Estate Agency. This is an online agency based in Manchester, and they usually sell property at a discount as the owners tend to be motivated. When I went to view this property, the guy was keen on selling it, but he still wanted a really good price. As you can see from the floor plans on screen, there wasn't much scope for adding a significant amount of value in relation to the property. At the time, all I wanted to do was buy something that was 25% below market value, as that's what all the courses I'd been on were telling me to do. Get the property at a 25% below market value discount and refinance at the market value in order to get all your money back out. I didn't take any after photos, but I did the following to this property. I painted it upstairs and downstairs. I put on a new roof on this property, thinking that it would add lots of value. I put down new carpet upstairs, and that was it. No new kitchen, no new bathroom, no new boiler, no rewire, no additional rooms added. I purchased this house on a buy-to-let mortgage and put down 25% deposit, so it cost me £21,000. I left this property on a buy-to-let mortgage. The money left in was £32,500. The return on investment was 10%. On my first buy-to-let, I was a normal armchair investor, and the reason I was for the following reasons. Dipping my toe into the water. Because this was my first buy-to-let, I wanted to make sure I wasn't taking a big risk. So I decided to buy a cheaper property, so if anything went wrong, my exposure would be limited. No stamp duty at the purchase price of £84,000, which at the time I thought was brilliant, such a cost saving. Value added. I didn't do too much work to this property, and so I felt at the time that there was no point in remortgaging the property onto another buy-to-let mortgage. When looking at the financial metrics, the only metric I used to see people talk about was the yield, and so on this particular property, the yield was 8.21%. So I felt like it was a good investment. At the time, I was working at Ernst & Young, and so it wasn't uncommon for me to be working 10 to 12 hours a day. In my network, property was seen as a long-term investment, and so something that you invested money in order to earn a return on your money, and anything creative was carried out by developers, and I didn't feel like a developer. I had purchased the property, completed minimal works, and wanted to forget about it so I could carry on with my day job. That was then, and this is me now. In the last 3 years, I've supercharged my property portfolio using the B4R model, where I'm able to buy properties at a lot of value and then recycle as much money as possible for the deposit for the next property. This has allowed me to buy properties in a way which is much faster, requires a lot less money than the traditional way of investing and the way I used to invest. B4R stands for buy, reconfigure, refurbish, rent and refinance. B4R is buy to lets on steroids. For example, the B4R strategy allowed me to purchase this house and convert it into 2 flats, with each flat costing me £21,000. I purchased this 3-bedroom house for £265,000. My plan was to create 2 flats, one upstairs and one downstairs. And what really attracted me to this house was that it had 2 entrances, and I thought I could utilize those in order to create the 2 separate flats, each with their own entrances. And I really liked the separate entrances and thought that these would be more appealing. So I started to view properties with 2 separate entrances and then started to make a list of the criteria the local council would look at when giving me planning permission to do the conversion. This was no different to the criteria I created when looking for 1-bedroom apartments I could convert into 2-bedroom apartments in central London. When I went to view the property, it was occupied by a family who were looking to move to a bigger house. The property was in good condition, not usually what I'm looking for. I'm usually looking for tied, dated properties, but in this instance, the owner wanted to move quickly and we agreed to purchase the house for £265,000. The house was originally on for £275,000, so not much of a discount compared to what I'm usually used to negotiating. But the floor plan worked. It ticked all the boxes on my criteria checklist. As you can see from the before floor plans, the 2 separate entrances meant that I could create a separate entrance for each flat. The ground floor flat would be accessed by the door on the left-hand side and access to the garden at the back. The first floor flat would be accessed by the door on the right-hand side where it says existing porch. You would enter into the porch and then go up the stairs. The floor plans you are seeing on screen is what our architect recommended, but we subsequently changed these to take advantage of the separate entrances. No communal areas to keep clean and look after, and no reports of missing post or lost items. Ground floor flat. We created an open plan kitchen diner and we used an interior designer to ensure we used the space well, looking at aspects such as lighting, furniture size selection and colour palettes. I feel this really helped to create a modern apartment with lots of space and storage with well-chosen bespoke furniture. The first floor flat had a really nice, welcoming, spacious entrance. The living area was designed really well, and in this apartment, we decided to have a separate kitchen, which made the apartment feel so much more spacious and bigger. The space upstairs was somewhat reduced due to the stairs and the entrance area, so we felt by putting in an open plan kitchen diner would make the apartment feel cramped. So we decided in this apartment to have a separate kitchen. Believe it or not, I found this property on Rightmove. The first thing that I looked at was the floor plan to see if the property had the 2 separate entrances and it was of a certain size and ticked all the boxes in relation to the criteria I had researched. I contacted the agent, who was great, and he started to call me and email me whenever something similar was coming on which wasn't on Rightmove yet. Question I get a lot of the time is, why would an agent do this? It's simple. The photos and the floor plans weren't ready, but the owner was happy to show anyone that was interested, and the agent looks like they're doing a great job if they can get someone who is genuinely interested to view the property in days and even before the photos and floor plans have been completed. It's a win-win. I purchased this house on a bridge, completed the works, created 2 separate leases for each of the apartments, and moved the freehold into my personal name, as generally lenders don't like the leaseholders to be the same as the freeholder. I refinanced each of the flats onto a buy-to-let mortgage, having created separate leases for each of the apartments. The overall valuation for the 2 flats came in at £410,000. This meant that on the refinance onto the buy-to-let mortgages, I ended up with each flat costing me £21,000. The money left in was £42,000, so £21,000 per apartment. The return on investment was 33%. If I compare that to a normal buy-to-let investor, the money left in would have been £124,600 with a return of 11%. Still a very good return. The multiplier for this project was 2.9, which means that I could have completed nearly 3 projects for every 1 completed by a normal buy-to-let investor using this model. The B4R model has allowed me to buy nearly 3 times the number of apartments when compared to the traditional way of investing and the way I used to invest. Using the B4R model, I have converted 1-bedroom flats into 2-bedroom flats, houses into 2 flats, and in the process of converting a mixed-use commercial building into 4 flats. I read this quote which really demonstrated what it felt like when I came across the B4R model, and also what it must feel like being on steroids. Once you see the results, it becomes an addiction.